these grants when you're a reviewer for the grants. So I think I was looking back, I think I was a chair of the study section a couple years ago in the fall, but it's all blurry at this point, so I'm not exactly sure, but it's been pretty recent. I know study sections kind of change over time and grading formats change and assessment formats change over time, but the basics are still going to be there. So the first point I want to make is about donor intent. So over here on the left, we have Oprah Winfrey, who has more money than you can imagine, and she's generous and gives it out in donations. So if she was giving $10 million out for corneal research, and she had to evaluate 3 projects, and one was a cure for breast cancer, which would be a tremendous gift for her to have, or a second project might be weight loss drug that can minimize your chance of getting diabetes, which is, affects 10% of the US population, if not more. And the third one is a cornea drug that's only going to help 100 people. Well, us personally, we might think maybe a cure for cancer would be pretty good, or a treatment for diabetes would be really good. But that's not what Oprah wants to do. She wants to get a drug that helps people who have corneal dystrophies and different eye diseases. So it's really only a drug that's going to help 100 people that she would be funding. Her $10 million would go to. Okay, so just keep that in mind, that when people have money to give for research, there's a reason they're giving it, and it's earmarked for a specific area. So the same is true with the F31 fellowship. And I just took this paragraph from the NIH website, and actually I was a little lazy. It's the same one I used last year and 2 years ago. So if it's been updated, forgive me. But I want to make these points about what's in this paragraph. There are some very specific things that they are looking for in their fellowships, okay? What they want to fund. They want to fund promising pre-doctoral students. They want to fund individualized mentor research training. They want to fund outstanding faculty. They want scientific health-related fields. They want dissertation research projects. So it can't be something that you're doing on the side separate from your PhD program. And they want to develop productive, independent research scientists, okay? So when you write your application, you want to make sure you hit upon all of these points that are in their statement of what they're looking to fund. So I'll just tell you, you're all promising pre-doctoral students. You're in a graduate program. You're doing well in the graduate program, so you have that fulfilled. You obviously are working with outstanding faculty because, like Dr. Kidd and Dr. Hardesty and myself, we're all outstanding people. So you're going to be training with outstanding faculty. You're in the Department of Pharmacology or another related department, so it's a scientific health-related field. And of course, we want you to be a productive, independent researcher, and I think everyone is on that trajectory. So all of these points are important. So just make sure they're in your proposal. When you're writing your proposal, think about what your summary statement is going to look like, what your evaluation is going to contain, okay? So if we were talking about research grants, so the grants that the faculty are applying for that fund the entire lab, there are 5 sections, or at least there were 5 sections: significance, investigator, innovation, research plan, and environment. So those are all important, but that's not what they look for in training grants, okay? In training grants, they're looking for the applicant, the sponsor, the training plan, and that's a really important point, training potential, and environment, okay? And so for each of these different types of grants, there's a different emphasis. So we call this the score driving criteria. So in research grants, so R01s, R21s, the score driving criteria are the research plan and the significance. Is this really going to make a scientific contribution? Because when you look at the statement of the goals of that grant, it is to do novel, significant research that is going to help society. When you look at the score driving criteria for training grants, the score driving criteria is the training plan. How is this going to help this individual to become a productive, independent scientist? So what potential is in place? So I want to emphasize, it doesn't matter how good the science is. The point is that it is a training grant and you need to have an outstanding training plan. Okay. So I'm just going to talk about a couple sections and briefly talk about things that you should think about when you're writing your application. So one thing is, as an applicant, you want to own all your mistakes. So if you had a rough semester, for some reason, as an undergraduate, had some trouble, maybe you were an engineering major and you realized you weren't doing well in engineering and you didn't really like it very much, and then you switched to a different area, write that in your application, right? That's part of your background. That's why you were having problems. If you were a football player and you realized you were having trouble juggling school and football, and so had some rough first couple of years of undergraduate, write that in your application and explain why there was a problem. If you had a relationship that went bad and had a terrible semester or two, write that in your application. So you're not making excuses. You're explaining why you had some problems, and then you want to explain why you're on the right track now, why it's worth investing in you in the future. You also want to own your productivity, and people tend to undersell the productivity that they've had. So we make you be productive by making you give seminars as first-year students, and we make you participate in Research Louisville. And if you win an award in Research Louisville, even greater, highlight that. If you've attended meetings in your first and second year of graduate school, highlight that. If you had research experience as an undergraduate, you want to put that in your application. All right, so you want to have things that show you think like a scientist, and kind of downplay the things that suggest that you're working as a technician, okay? So it's not so much that you have skills, so you know how to run an assay or do an experiment, but you know how to design an experiment, and you're interested in doing that and developing that skill further. And then be specific in what you have in your application. So what you accomplish. So indicate that you've made a new cell line, or that you've tested different compounds, or there is something that you have accomplished, and very specific. So you don't want to say you mastered cell culture. You want to say, I generated a cell line that we used for these experiments. Also, this might be more my pet peeve than anything else, but avoid generic terms. So if you describe your research as being interesting, or your development being professional, or the area you're going into exciting, that really does not mean anything. That's like you couldn't think of another word, or you didn't have access to a thesaurus to come up with better words, right? So you want to describe things by what they'll do, or what the outcome will be. So you're developing new drugs for corneal wounds, or you're understanding the side effects of cisplatin exposure. So all of those things are very specific. And so they can tell people that you're really doing something that matters. And hopefully the reviewer will believe it matters, but the more specific you are, the better off you are. The next thing is the sponsor. So in my experience, most applications had a co-sponsor. So that would be your primary mentor and somebody else. And the idea of having a co-sponsor is to get complementary experience. So, for example, you could have me as a sponsor because I have experience in receptor biology and I've trained students. But then maybe you want Dr. Hardesty to be a co-sponsor because he has experience in molecular toxicology and using animal models. And the two of us together would be able to help your project that is looking at the effects of PCB exposure on EGF receptor signaling, okay? So combining us two together, and so now I have it written differently on the slide, but Hardesty can be the primary mentor. I'm fine with that. I'll be the co-mentor. But however you do it, you want to have two people who have complementary expertise that will make sure that you are able to get through your graduate training and the training that you propose and moving forward. The other thing about the sponsor is that you want to make sure there is a clear indication who is going to provide financial support in the event that the grant is not funded. I know that sounds a little bit crazy because if the grant's funded, then you have financial support. But the study section members and the NIH likes to see that there is kind of a backup plan in place, and you're not just relying on this fellowship to get the science done. You're relying on the fellowship to have training that you can become a productive independent scientist. All right, so next thing is the environment. When we write research grants, our environment is typically the equipment and facilities and some of the intellectual resources that are available. When you write a training grant, there's much more of an emphasis on the intellectual environment. So where are you going to go for help? Where are you going to go for new ideas? Where are you going to go to form collaborations with other people? So for instance, you would definitely say that you go to the Farm Talk seminar series every week. For students in my lab, that we go to ophthalmology seminar that has external speakers. There's a vision retreat that we go to. There's Research Louisville or OVOST, that there's a summer training grant in place, that there's a histology core. But all of these things are designed to show that you can help your research and your project that you're planning to do. Now, we have some really outstanding facilities on this campus. And if you're using those facilities, you want to make sure that you include them, right? If your project has one aim that involves a lot of mass spec, you want to have a lot of details about the mass spec facility and what kind of mass spec machinery is available and who runs the machines and what it costs to run your samples and how many people use it. But if your project doesn't have anything to do with mass spectrometry, you don't need to include that information on your grant. You want to make sure you include the things that are germane to what you're proposing to do for your research. And again, it's not only physical things, but it's also the intellectual environment that shows you will have an opportunity to grow scientifically and become a better scientist and researcher and foster your independence. All right, and then the final kind of section is the training program. And as I said, this is the score driving component of your training grant. This is something that you should think about, set down, go back to, and think about, talk about with other people, and kind of come up with a consensus over several weeks, if not several months, so you can get the best training plan possible. And so the first thing I would do is start with the individual development plan that you all have to do each year as part of your training in the pharmacology program. And what this is going to help you do is identify what kind of career you want in science. So maybe you want to go into academia, maybe you want to go into biotech, maybe you want to be a clinician, scientist, but whatever that is, you really want to identify that first. And then once you know where you want to go, then you can start making a path that leads in that direction. So you start with your training plan and come up with a way to get there. Identify weaknesses in that plan. So if you want to do drug discovery and you don't know anything about molecular modeling, maybe that should be a component of your training plan, right? That's something that you're going to do. If you are going to do bioinformatics, maybe you need to have a course in bioinformatics that are part of your training plan and indicate how you're going to learn how to do that. If you're going to do live cell imaging, maybe you need to have someone from the microscopy facility that will help you learn how to do that. But you want to have a program that is unique to you and not shared by everyone else that is in your graduate school cohort. In terms of mapping out your training plan, I would come up with 5 or 6 reasonable goals, some that are scientific and some that are personal, and kind of balance the two of those as key pillars of your training plan. So scientific goals might be bioinformatics, working with a unique model system, or at least a model system that's new to you, biophysical chemistry and different assays like that, risk assessment, clinical trials, drug development. Those would all be scientific areas that you might want to develop personally. And you definitely want to have something that you develop that you haven't shown expertise in. So if you worked for 2 years before you went to graduate school in a bioinformatics core, that shouldn't be part of your training plan. That should be something you already have expertise in, and you want to build on that to the next level. And then the other component are the personal training components. So things like oral communication, grant writing, public speaking, mentoring, networking, manuscript writing. I would definitely recommend that you have this as part of a component of your training plan. And what I would recommend doing is maybe taking 3 scientific objectives and 2 personal objectives and combining them together into the research plan that will help you for your long-term goals. So if your long-term goal is to become a biology instructor at a small liberal arts college, I would make sure public speaking and mentoring and teaching would be some of those personal goals. Okay. If your goal is to lead a drug discovery section at Eli Lilly, I would make sure that biophysical chemistry or molecular modeling was one of your goals. Okay. So you have to make it tailored to what you want to do. And then make your goals specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So the SMART paradigm. So if you were interested in mentoring, indicate how you're going to get mentoring experience. So one way would be to supervise an undergraduate from the R25 program. If you want teaching experience, then you get then you pursue an opportunity to teach in, say, dental hygiene or pharmacology 1, so that you get that experience in being in front of a classroom. Again, bioinformatics, take a course. If you want to learn microscopy, you say that there is a person at the microscopy core that is going to train you how to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, so make sure those specific components are in your training plan so you can be as specific as possible. So the way I would lay out my plan is in 3 different layers. So the first layer would be your research plan. Okay, so I'm using examples that are relevant to my lab because it's easiest for me and I don't have to think so hard about good examples. But I might want to develop a C-Cybl antagonist in the first year. The second year is screen for the best antagonist. And the third year, I want to test it in mice. Okay, so that's what my research plan is in terms of specific aims that are going to be in your PhD proposal. These would be kind of components of that proposal. And then we talk about an applicant's training plan. Then we start talking about things that are going to help us get to these different research goals. Okay, so maybe in year 1, you want to learn in vitro skills, how to grow protein, how to manage cell lines, how to do molecular modeling. And down the road, maybe you want to take a molecular genetics course so that, or a mouse genetics course so you can test your compound in mice down the road. You want to have some of the components of your personal development, like attending a national meeting, some scientific writing, like writing a review article, and maybe mentoring activity like mentoring an undergraduate. And the second year, you kind of build on that again, develop a plan for screening the Cybl antagonist, establishing cell lines, start breeding the mice, write your first manuscript, teach in the dental hygiene pharmacology. Third year, you want to learn about wound healing assays, get your second manuscript, find a postdoc, present at ASCB conference, mentor another undergrad, finish your dissertation. So you're kind of building and you're covering all of those components of your personal training plan. Okay, so you get all of that in place. And then finally, there's the sponsors plan that goes along with it. And what is critical is you have this conversation and meeting with your sponsor on a regular basis to make sure that what they're saying you're going to do matches with what you're saying you're going to do, right? So if you're saying that you're going to have weekly meetings, make sure your sponsor says that you're going to have weekly meetings, and your co-sponsor is involved in that too. That you're going to get feedback, quarterly meetings with the group about modeling, learn about editing a paper, teaching animal care, and so on and so on, okay, in the second and third year. So everything has to fit hand in glove so that you're not contradicting yourself, which is something that is very common in fellowships, is that the mentor says one thing, we're going to meet every week, and then the student says we're going to meet once a month or something, which that's fairly minor, but they can be much bigger things. So a student might say, I'm going to take all my samples to the microscopy core and they're going to analyze them. And the sponsor says the student is going to learn how to run the microscope and do all the analysis. All right. So again, your mentor's plan, your plan should be the same as your mentor's plan, should be the same as the letters of support. So when you get your letters of support, make sure they are aware of what you are actually presenting. So you don't want a generic letter of support. You want one that's specific for your training plan. All of this takes a little bit more effort, but at the end of the day, it's really going to be a couple hours more effort to get everything lined up. But if it doesn't line up, it's on you to go back to the person who wrote your letter of support and said, this isn't really what I wanted. I wanted you to emphasize that I'm proficient in receptor biology and I am going to learn molecular modeling down the road. That's what I need to learn next. So you need to be in the driver's seat and make sure this all happens properly. So I talked about some of those inconsistencies. The last one was really a big inconsistency that we would see, I would say 5 or 6 times, where a student says, I've passed my qualifying exam, and a letter would say that the student is getting ready to take their qualifying exam. And so you know it's not something that's going to absolutely kill a grant, but it does throw the reviewers off, that you wonder what's going on. Why doesn't everything line up? The other thing that you have to have in your training plan is your percent effort in different things. And what I would see is that some students would have very detailed percent efforts. So they would have everything listed: research, seminars, lab meetings, national meetings, so on and so on. And they'd break it down to percentages and it'd equal 100%, which is just kind of crazy to me, to have that kind of detail, to know what you were going to do in the next year down to the percentage wise. Some had very little detail and some were in between. I would recommend that you be somewhere in between and kind of group some things together. So instead of talking about local meetings and national meetings, just group them together. Meetings and seminars could be one group. Teaching and mentoring could be one group. And that way you have a little bit more flexibility. So if you say 10% of your time is going to be in teaching and mentoring, well, that's 4 hours a week. And that's really quite a bit of time. Really, research has to be your highest percentage. So typically that would be anywhere from 75 to 90% of the students' time would be in doing their research. And since this is a training grant for our PhD program to develop productive, independent researchers, doing research is going to be a big component of it. So just keep that in mind. And then my final advice is give yourself some time. So Ann No was saying contact the office as soon as possible. I couldn't agree with her more, that you really have to get in touch with them and you have to set aside some time each week to work on this. So even if it's only 4 hours a week to work on this, that's really going to help you make progress if you're super focused and on top of things. I would suggest that you give your proposal as a talk. So whether you do it to a big group or just to a couple people, that you articulate your ideas and let them interrupt you while you're speaking and tell you what they like and what they don't like. You're going to get much better feedback that way than if you hand someone a 20-page document and ask them to read it and give you feedback. Because for the most part, people are, it's going to be hit or miss, I think, if you give them a big document to read. When you get your final document that won't be final, but you think it's going to be final, then you can give it to people and get some feedback on the writing and make sure ideas are well articulated. There's no typos. The flow is logical. And then finally, I would suggest that you remember the F31 application is different than the PhD proposal. So the PhD proposal doesn't have necessarily a training component to it. It's all scientific proposal, right? You have your aims, their background and significant, and your experimental design, whereas the F31 application has that critical training component that you really have to think about. And thinking about it is really for the best for you personally, because graduate school is just a small step in your career. Once you finish graduate school, then you move on to the real stuff. Okay. So think about how you want to prepare yourself so you are ready to get a job when you finish your PhD and be a successful independent scientist. So I'm happy to take any questions that there are, and I will answer them to the best of my ability.
Thank you. Any questions? You can raise your hand and then I will call you out. I know y'all have questions. Well, oh, Idle?
Thank you, Dr. Ceresa. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on kind of the role of, for your PhD proposal, you have a committee. What could be the role of the committee members? How should one integrate those into the grant? Because you mentioned that a lot of the grants have a co-mentor, which I thought was interesting. And then would those other committee members, could they be like additional like training people and you could get letters of support from them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a excellent point. That's a great idea. So presumably you picked your committee based on the fact that they have something to offer to your project, right? Not just because they were nice people or fun people or easily accessible or easy to schedule things with, which all would be really helpful for your PhD committee meetings. But if you have complementary knowledge from your committee members, those would be fantastic people to write your letters of support and actually incorporate them into your grant as well. So when you say you're going to learn receptor biology and radioligand binding, and that's why you want me on your committee, and I can write a letter saying I'm going to teach you that. That looks really strong, and being able to cite papers that we've done that before. And even better if we could show that part of your poster from Research Louisville showed our collaboration. That would just make things really tight in terms of showing that there is thought to what's going on and there is collaboration, and you are well on your way to being a productive independent scientist. So yeah, that's a really good point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. You mentioned that they should own their mistakes, and where do you see in the document where they could do that?
Own them. Yeah, I mean, so I think things are a little bit different now with the BioSketch. I don't think you have to put your grades from the courses you took.
No.
So if you can gloss over that, then you don't have to own as much there. But in your personal statement, in your bio sketch, you could talk about, I don't know, that you started undergraduate as undecided and kind of explored that you wanted to do art and that wasn't for you, and then you decided biology, and then you got really excited about biology. So then that could explain, like, maybe that's why it took you 5 years to get through undergraduate. I guess I did forget that the grades were removed from the bio sketch now.
Yes,
So
yeah, they are.
but if there are somehow lapses in your education history, so if it took you 5 years, if you went for 2 years, if you went to 3 different colleges as an undergraduate or something, I mean, there's a whole bunch of ways you can make mistakes between the ages 18 to 25. Probably not many people here have done that, but it can happen. So
Or even if you had to take a break for medical reasons or maternity leave or paternity leave, what have
right, those are not mistakes, right?
you. No, they're not. But
But
it could
yeah, so
cause a gap in productivity, right?
right, yeah.
So, my other question, and I guess I'll do this in two parts. Um, so what if the students are not interested in going into academia? How important would it still be? What would be the significance, though, of them still securing a grant, like a F-series grant? And then the part two of that question is just from the perspective of being in an academic environment, how important would it be for them to get a grant to kind of help out the funding situation in their particular lab?
Well, okay. So, and the second question, yeah, I mean, things are crazy at the NIH these days. So I think every single mentor on this campus would appreciate if a student could contribute to the funding of the lab. But as I said, you need to make sure that you indicate that your success in the laboratory is not dependent on you getting this funding, right? It's kind of a weird thing, but they want to know that this infrastructure is in place so that you are ready to go and ready to be successful. So I think it is important to indicate that that infrastructure is in place, that safety net is in place. As far as if you're not interested in a career in academia, you're kind of asking the wrong person, because I've always been in academia. But I do appreciate that not everyone wants to go into academia. I think that's fantastic. There's no problem with that. I will say getting an F-31 grant. So my previous graduate student, Kate, had an F-31 grant. She had people knocking on her door to give her postdoctoral fellowships. I mean, she had people from coast to coast asking her, from Scapin's Eye Institute to UCLA to Johns Hopkins, and she's at Penn now, is where she decided to pursue her postdoctoral studies. I'm not sure that Kate wants to go into academia. I've asked her, and she's on the fence. So I would say getting an F-31 is not going to hurt you. If you decide not to go into academia, I don't think there's any cost to you for getting an F-31. I think you'll learn a lot of skills about writing a grant and filing paperwork and filing reports on your productivity. I think those things would be very important if you go into industry. If you're in a biotech company, you can guarantee that they are going to want to make sure that you are accountable and you are making progress on a regular basis. So filling those, not really filling out those reports, but filing those reports is going to be important as well. So I think the skills are really important. I'm sure people in biotech might say, yeah, it doesn't matter at all. But I want to tell you that learning how to write and being accountable for what you accomplish and having a plan and fulfilling that plan is going to be a good thing. It's going to help you in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I think even in government positions, like maybe you don't have to write grants, but they will have you write contracts, and those are usually like 3 to 5 page documents that kind of follow up
Mhm.
grant format.
Writing is important. You'll really use a lot of writing skills as a scientist.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. If there are no further questions, I guess we will just thank you so much for your presentation. And
All right, you're
thank you for
welcome.
your time.
All right, thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
All right, so our next and last but not least guest is Dr. Hardesty. You guys have seen him many times over, but now in a more less formal setting where, he can, I don't know, share some tips and tricks in terms of how to navigate through the F-series process. And then we can just open up the floor for any final questions. Oh, he has a formal presentation. Okay, now I love it.
Yeah, not too many slides. It's kind of more just kind of insights and advice I've had over the years that have worked for me in ways and things that I've learned. So it's more to kind of encourage, comments and discussion as well. But like I said in the introduction, I've kind of went through the F-31 phase and the F-32 phase, and then now the K-99 and the R00 phase. So it's primarily my path for academia and the different phases of my career for grant writing. But I think a lot of these are applicable to just writing in general or proposal writing, where you're trying to convince a panel to give you money for something, for in this case, it's for research and funding your research stipend at the graduate level or postdoctoral level. But one thing that, and everyone probably hits it over the head, is having like a really strong specific aims page. It's kind of what, at least me as a reviewer, what I've done is always go back to the specific aims page to kind of just recenter myself on what's being proposed. So it's really important to have it very concise, readable. I like to include like a scheme, an overview of the whole project. Um, it's really it's tough to write, and fit everything in one page, but if you have one that really is concise and your concepts and your ideas come across really vividly to the reviewer, it really helps, I think, strengthen your application. um, a lot of times as scientists, we're realists in a way, and we think, well, based on the data I have, I think it's this way, but it could be, you don't want to get into this mode. It could be XYZ, up to 10 different things, because you really want to have it kind of focused, and in your alternative strategies and the research statement part, you can really acknowledge some of the top ones, but you don't want to you know overly be kind of pessimistic, and that this could be wrong and it could be 10 other things that are going on. So that's why I'm kind of reiterating, just kind of make sure the delivery of your research concept is easily understood. um, Second, you always want to make the reviewer's job easier, whether it's grant writing or for your manuscripts. In grant writing, that could take the form of an acronym table. Many of the reviewers, for me, for example, they may not be experts in liver disease. So, they may want to see acronyms for ALD or MASLD, and to kind of having that helpful tool incorporated in your research strategy, it kind of helps the reviewer kind of go through and kind of get the basic concepts of your grant without having to take, many steps to kind of look up, what does this mean? What does that mean? And so forth. It can also be helpful to have tables or figures that kind of show what your experimental design is, instead of just having a block of text. There's many different ways to kind of convey what you're doing in a grant without having just a block of text that the reader or reviewer may get lost in. um, and then, whenever you submit a grant and you get the reviewer comments back, and same with, a manuscript, is you don't ever want to just be argumentative about the reviewer, just, and this is kind of hard because, you're putting yourself out there intellectually, and, you're really kind of bound to your project. You've been working on it for years and months, but you don't want to take it personal. Just if a reviewer says, I don't I don't understand the rationale for this experiment in aim two, and you say, well, it's there, it's here in line 30 on page two, it may be there, but take it as, take accountability in the fact that, okay, well, maybe I need to work this in multiple places throughout the application, or make a figure to kind of really get that idea across. So I feel like you kind of have a sense of power over your, trajectory if you take accountability, instead of saying, oh, it was just these three bad reviewers ruined my career, or something, just kind of, having, the assertiveness to, okay, well, clearly this didn't come across to the panel. I needed to take accountability to kind of make sure this, when I resubmit, that I really get these ideas to conveyed on paper. Um, and for me, most of the comments I ever received, they're not, hateful, or, unwarranted. And most of the time, they're coming from a place where they're trying to help strengthen your training and your proposal. Let's see. And then is the third is probably pretty important, is, it's always better to start earlier and give yourself plenty of time to write your proposal. This gives you time to kind of really do your best on your own, and with your mentor's help, and then let your mentor and people also that your mentor trusts in your field to kind of critique it. So, Dr. Ceresa, he sits on study sections for these kind of grants, and it's helpful for him. It may be helpful for him to look at it just to see if there's always going to be the technical stuff that you want people really close to your research to look at, but for like the grand scheme of, okay, do I have the right mentors in place? Am I emphasizing the right institution support here at U of L? Those kinds of things, people outside of your field can really help you with as well. And also, typographical issues or formatting issues, a lot of people can really pick those up on, like in your lab, for a second set of eyes to look it over. Another thing is, it's definitely a marathon in putting together any type of proposal. So, you want to reward yourself when you're meeting those milestones, so you just don't, burn out and just kind of just go to just writing down something on paper, or on your computer, and then not giving yourself time to review it to say, does this really make sense? Is this really how I want to organize it to flow, and so forth? So, give yourself, time and breaks, and reward yourself when you're, getting certain sections accomplished, because there are many sections and components to these applications. Um, Another piece of advice, it's not, I think Dr. Ceresa kind of gave me this advice when I was a student, but it's not the exact wordage, but it's kind of, you want to make your hypothesis, so whether you're right or wrong, there's still some type of direction for your project, or an upshot. Um, and sometimes it can be tricky, but there's always opportunity to do that, to where no matter what the data shows, there's some direction for you to progress and build from. Um, and for writing, for me, it's always, I try to say, okay, I want to try to get these two sections done today. So kind of, scheduling your, to get all the sections done, maybe make a schedule to where you're working on, the abstract, the narrative, um, and, maybe a letter of support, for somebody. And Dr. Ceresa was really kind of hitting on it. It's very common that for your say, a letter of support from like different cores and stuff, it's always good to meet with them, and talk about your project. And then, you can always bring up, are you okay if I write a template letter? And maybe it's just like bullet points saying, like, I really want to emphasize this training component in working with you. Could you incorporate this in the letter? Or, most people are pretty responsive because they want to, write a strong letter of support for you as well. So having a conversation with them about it and kind of asking, hey, can I write a template letter that you can kind of fill in to strengthen to letter support? Because everyone's busy, and willing to, if they're willing to help you, they want you to kind of let them know like what needs to be in this letter to kind of strengthen your application as well. So it's always good to meet with whoever you're going to have a letter support from in your application. Um, and this last one is advice from Dr. David Samuelson in biochem when I was a student. Is you know people tend to give advice based on their past experience. So, in their grant writings, and so I always listen to everyone's advice, and I don't discredit it or anything. I just listen to what they have to say and kind of take away what I can use to benefit my application. But to that, you don't need to follow everyone's advice, especially if you're getting a lot of outside, advice from other people besides your mentor or mentorship team. You can listen to what they have to say, but if it maybe doesn't fit, what you're working on, or you don't think it's going to strengthen your proposal, you can't listen to everybody's advice because it's always, ultimately you're responsible for your application and working closely with your mentor, of course, but always listen to advice because there's always something you could pick up on that you didn't think about, or something you didn't consider that it happened to somebody else, and they can kind of give you some advice that's helpful. And continued, there's, you really want to understand the subject matter of your proposal, especially for I put as an example, like for one of my grants of studying mitochondrial function, the people on the review panel may not be experts in mitochondrial function, but they've been around and researched long enough to know the typical assays that people use to assess those mitochondrial functions, such as seahorse. And so you definitely want to have, if you're proposing something, you would definitely want to have the kind of the barrage of those techniques that are typically used. It's okay to have something new also, but you want to really have, kind of the bare bones, what people typically use to assess mitochondrial function. This is seahorse or Ouroboros or something like that. Just using that as an example, because if you're looking at something, but you're not proposing the common techniques that are used, then it's kind of a red flag in the reviewer's eye. Of like, it's like, do they, are they truly assessing this correctly? Um, Another thing is to make sure your experimental design is technically sound. So, going back to the lecture I had before, just making sure if applicable, you have a positive negative control. You have the correct control groups. You have a vehicle group if you're using a treatment or something like that, including sex as a variable, or if not, having a justification for that. Um, and the third one, I did this a lot as a student because, um, there's a lot of really cool techniques that you may not think are applicable to your field until you see like some other papers that have used it in similar fields. So for me, uh, for example, for ALD, sepsis is a common field that sometimes we'll look at high impact papers in the sepsis field and see kind of what techniques or methods they're used, and see if we could apply that to liver disease, for example. So I always like to go to like Nature, Science, Cell, look, maybe you have a gene of interest or protein of interest or a disease of interest that you could kind of look to kind of get ideas of. It's like, oh, well, this technique's perfect for what I'm proposing. That kind of gives me the most bang for the buck, for example, on what you're looking at. Um, and then the next one, Yeah, so luck presents itself to individuals that keep themselves in the mix. So, it's if you keep at it and keep kind of working on it, at some point you'll, be successful. As long as you're, not putting out the same, application, but you're taking the rear concerns to heart and you're making changes, you're learning. You keep yourself in the mix, so to speak. Eventually you'll get quote lucky, but it's really, you kind of went through all the whole process to acquire a score or grant funding or whatever the case may be. Um, Another thing is always have you can never have too many people look over your grant or your writing just for grammatical typographical errors because um, I had a program officer once, said that, to a lot of reviewers, it looks sloppy. Like if they have the grammatical errors or typographical errors, it looks like they didn't take the time to really review it. And it's kind of, at least for that study section, considered sloppy by the reviewers. So always be sure that you have, avoid as many grammatical, typographical errors as you can. Another thing that Dr. Seraser brought up was you want to make sure, as you put one of these together, um, it's your responsibility to kind of collate everything and make sure everything's connected, essentially. So, for example, in the mentor statement, they say that you're going to learn RNA-seq in AIM-1, but what you have written is proposing proteomics. So there's a disconnect there. So you want to keep everything as consistent as possible. So, if you come across this with your, talk to your mentors, say, I thought we were proposing proteomics, and there's, oh, sorry, have them, edit the mentor statement or say, go ahead and fix that part to make it consistent. Because, they really want to see that all your sections are connected, well thought out. And basically there's, nothing that they can deem you on, so to speak. So I think for advice, that's everything I have, but I did want to kind of show you kind of like these are a list of grants that I've obtained over the years, and you see it, it's a list of merit and success for me as a junior faculty, but what you don't see and what I see is the path that I had to go through to get or acquire all of these. So kind of just walking through a few, as a graduate student, I had a F-31 that the first go around it didn't get funded, and it didn't go to the IC that we initially wanted it to, and then we made some corrections, resubmitted, and it still went to NIDDK instead of NIEHS. But eventually, the score did improve this go around, and NIEHS considered it a fundable score. And one benefit that I think the NIH is, especially for trainees, is I think they try to fund as many as possible. And what you'll see is a lot of grants that are approaching the October, end of the fiscal year, if they have money available. These are, lower monetary value projects that can kind of, if they have a competitive score, can fall into the funding category. So I think NIH really tries to fund as many as they can. Um, and this other one, so this was an internal, the T-32 program. I applied twice while I was waiting to hear back about my F-32. Um, and it got funded on the first go around. So even though this is kind of internal, there's still, it's, I didn't get it. It wasn't like an automatic checkbox where I got it, um, and then for my F-32, I didn't get a score on the first submission, but I did get a fundable score on the second, and it was able to get funded. And then the K99R00, it was one of those that fell. It was like, or quote, lucky that it was kind of was around the time of September or August, approaching the end of the fiscal year, and it had a competitive enough score that it got funded before the end of the fiscal year. So it's kind of you see people or, faculty that they're well funded, but, you don't always see like, how many times did you have to submit the grant to get it funded or, what kind of path did you have to go through? So, it's definitely never been a slam dunk for me. And I'm sure most faculty can kind of attest to that it's never, you know, it's, it's always, trials and tribulations when going through the funding through extramural grants. But, so with that, I'll take any questions or, any comments that anyone has. To kind of help you on your journey.
We have plenty of time for questions. Does anybody have any questions? I mean, this is a valuable resource right here, just in with Dr. Hardesty alone. I'll start us off. Maybe that'll jog somebody's. Oh, Idle. Yes, please.
Thank you, Dr. Hardesty. I just thought of this and I've been meaning to look it up, but how many times are you allowed to resubmit for the F30 or in general?
Yeah, so
Very good
unless
question.
it's changed, I believe, you have your first submission and then you have a resubmission and then on your third go, it's considered a new application. So you don't have to start from scratch. It's just in the system, it's going to be considered a new application. So they don't, you're not going to be forced to like throw your project away. It's just you basically it's considered a new submission because you'll still get comments from that from the resubmission that you can use to improve your application.
Dr. Hardesty. Do
Yeah.
you know if in UFL you have a resource of like the F31s from other students that have actually gotten the award so that other people can actually look at them to see what they did right so that they can do something similar or better their writing skills in that way?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a internal or department resource, but I can definitely upload my F31 and my F32 because they're very similar in a way. Probably the F32 is a little bit more recent, so I can share that with you all if that you think that would help. Because sometimes it's good just to see kind of what successful grant applications kind of look like to kind of help guide you. So I can upload those after this meeting. But yeah, I don't know, Dr. Kidd, do you know if there's a departmental resource for that or? Uh,
Um, what I would recommend is that you can go to NIHreporter.com and then you can put in, let's say you're looking for F31 application. So you put in F31 and University of Louisville, and then you'll see the recently funded grants. And then you can coordinate with Ann No, who could, maybe be a if you don't feel comfortable emailing that person yourself, you can have maybe and no reach out or even Paula. She's on the third floor in the CTRB building. Paula Franklin, I believe her last name is, and see if they would be willing to reach out to the PI and see if they would be, which would be another graduate student or postdoc or MD PhD student, and then see if they would be willing to share their application in whole or in part. But just keep in mind that the format of the F series grants has changed substantially compared to like last year. So just kind of bear that in mind, especially when you get to like what I call like when you start talking about the mentoring plan, the environment that's going to support your research. Any other questions? That was a really good one. No, one I don't see any hands. One question that I have, do you have an idea of like maybe like how they should organize themselves for for the grant, because it's a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Is there any recommendations that you have?
Um, obviously we like to spend a lot of time on the science part, but I think once and things may change, scientifically, but once you kind of have the core of the science and your research strategy and specific aims, I like to kind of pick off the easy sections as I can. Then you can always go back and review them as you're getting closer. But like the narrative is like 3 sentences. The abstract, it's just half a page. I think you get 30 lines or something. Um, the vertebrate animal section, if you're proposing animal work, if you have your animal experiments, laid out, go ahead and take care of that. Um, so I kind of like to get the core science, even though you may add here or there, but you're not going to drastically change it. I like to kind of start picking off some of the easier sections um, early on. Um, I like to, you know, contact who your referees are going to be and see if they're able to provide a reference letter. That's probably the first thing I do, once I was committed to, doing that, because it's on their time essentially, so you don't want to contact them like a week before the grants due, and they can submit it as early as months before, and you'll get like a update in ERA Commons. So I like to contact the referees, and then also for letter of support, kind of talk to the your mentor and who you think would be good for letter of support for like a core or something. Set up a meeting to kind of, this is experiment we're thinking to do. What do you think of it technically, and would you be willing to provide a letter of support? And I like to do those things up front. Um, and then once you have kind of the core research foundation and your specific aims and research strategy, start trying to pick off a lot of those easier documents. And then you really want to spend a lot of time on the training plan, and as you're starting to accrue different sections, um, make sure that as you're reviewing them that it's consistent between the documents, that you know um, because if you start too early and then there's a lot of changes to what you're proposing in the research, you're opening yourself to miss some, maybe initially you were really going to do proteomics in aim one, but now it's changed to RNA-seq. So that's why I like to have the research, at least the core ideas nailed down, because it's going to be reflected a lot in your training, plan and your mentor statements and so forth. Um, so that's kind of like, I guess, my, referees, letters of, your bare bones of your research, like specific aims, and then your referees, letter of support, um, nail down your mentorship team, and then, once your research strategy, specific aims, the core ideas are there, then I would start trying to tackle all the other sections, and then spend a lot of time on your training plan.
Mhm. Very good. And then I guess another question I have, and then we'll end there. We'll just end a little early unless there are some other questions that percolate. And that is, so I know you mentioned that, they may not get their grant funded on the first go round. So how can they mentally prepare themselves for that? Or what would you recommend? And yeah, because it can be discouraging, if your grant doesn't get funded.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think the reaction for me is similar to like a paper that they don't even give you a chance to revise or anything. It's kind of a similar gut feeling. It doesn't feel great, but I give myself to, read through it, kind of generally kind of fast pace. Um, and then, maybe take a day or two and then come back to it and really kind of, okay, like, what did they really not like, and kind of start, formatting it, and like, kind of maybe there's multiple issues that multiple reviewers found that you could kind of collate a response to and really start thinking about it. So, it's definitely, it takes the experience to kind of bounce back from bad critique, or bad review. But definitely go through, feel what you're feeling. You can feel upset, feel mad, go through all those range of emotions, and then give yourself a couple days, and then kind of pick back up and then read more in depth. And it's like, okay, well, what did they not see, or what can I really do to address this? That's kind of my feedback. So, it's you're intellectually putting yourself out there, and they don't like your idea, or they don't see the rationale in doing it. It always hurts, stings a little bit.
Hmm. Right, exactly. I agree. Well, any other questions? Forever hold your peace? No, just kidding. Well, you guys kind of know where we live, well, so many of you have been to my office. I'm on the 3rd floor, room 306. Dr. Hardesty, I believe you're on the 5th floor.
Yeah.
What's your office number?
522.
22. So, yeah, so but if you guys have any questions, you have like a few more resources that y'all can tap into. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Hardesty. We
It's nice to see
appreciate
all.
you.
Have a good Thanksgiving. See you all.
Yes, yes, yes. All right. Thank you, guys. I'll hang around just in case anybody has any questions. Oh, make sure that everyone, like if you haven't had a chance to, if you can place your reviews, your critiques of everyone's research strategy, aim 1 and 2, if you place those in the folders.
Uh-huh.
All of your oral presentations, as long as you showed up for it, all of those, you will get 100% on that, including the review. So you don't have to worry about that. And then I see Ian. Oh, and then you do have, I guess, what I'll do is just say up to the time that you have to turn in the full application. Those are the sections that I'll use. Like, let's say you submitted a specific Ames page and you weren't happy with that grade. Let's say it was, I don't know, 80. I gave you an 80 and you're like, I want to do better, then just take the comments that I gave you and improve it, and then I'll adjust the grade accordingly. Except if you were like crazy late. If you were an hour or two late, okay, I'm not going to dock you for that. But if you were like almost a whole day late, yeah, I'm going to have to knock off at least 5 points. Or whatever I said on the syllabus. Okay, Ian, you have a question.
So my question was, for the whole document, you want us to submit it to some folder that you're gonna make?
Oh, okay, yes, I will create that.
And
folder
how do you
before.
want the format? Do you want abstract references, specific aims, significance and innovation,
Yeah,
and then the approach?
almost like in the same order in which we had the assignment. So the abstract, the specific aims, the significance, the innovation, and then the approach for aims 1 and 2, and then ending off with your references.
Sounds good. Thank you.
So it's a lot, but I think you guys can walk away with this experience saying you've gone through most. Oh, I forgot the career development piece. Oh, I forgot, and I forgot the NIH bio sketch. So let me do that over again. So you'll put, see if I can remember.
So abstract.
Actually, it almost doesn't matter. I almost don't care. But maybe we'll just put your NIH bio sketch and then the career development plan right after the abstract. There we go. We'll just put it there. Because generally, yeah, I think that's a good placement for it. But as long as the sections are there, I don't care, to be honest. You can put it in any order you want. It just will make it easy if we're all on the same page. Nicole.
Yeah, so I had a question about the EndNote workshop that we had to.
Yeah, I saw your email and you're good.
Oh, okay.
You're welcome. So yeah, you can just write me a piece of paper and that says you took it and then just upload that. There you go. Or you could screenshot that email and upload that. It's no big deal. Okay, yes, Casey. No, that's idle, but maybe, yes, there you go, idle.
Thank you. If we do want, like if we have an updated version of our specific aims, for example, do we need to include that in the final document as well as resubmit it to the original specific aims submission area?
Administratively, it would help me if you could.
Okay.
My only other ask is don't get rid of the original document that you submitted, because to be honest, what I'm going to do is hold both up side by side and say, well, did they address these points? It'll just make my review a lot easier. So if you've already taken away those documents, please put them back.
Okay.
No, we're good. We're good. Not you specifically. That was just a general you.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Well, having none, I will yield back 32 minutes of your time and have a happy Thanksgiving. And if not, may it be productive. Yeah. And you know where to find me. Peace. Have a good one. Thank you. I
Thanks,
enjoyed
Dr.
you
Kid.
guys. I learned
Thank
probably
you.
more from you than you may have learned from me, but I really enjoyed this class and
Hello.
enjoyed going through this process with you guys.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
I'll hang
Bye.
around just in
Thank
case
you.
somebody wants to talk with me privately. All right. Okay, guess not.